Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. Every year, video game studio Electronic Arts releases a new installment in its various sports franchises to coincide with the start of a new season. Though more recent titles have garnered a mixed response from their respective fanbases, each release gives one of the sport's top performers from the season prior the prestigious honour of being featured as the game's cover athlete, where their likeness is then plastered all over the promotional material in order to help sell copies of the game. Despite the studio using this technique for many years now, the decision to use a singular cover athlete for the NHL games didn't begin until 6 years after the series began. It wasn't until NHL 97 that the marketing team decided to go solo and feature goaltender John Van Beesbroek on the cover, which in turn started a yearly tradition for the franchise that has now spanned almost 2.5 decades. Now with this privilege comes an even greater expectation for the cover athlete to kick their game up a notch and dominate their respective league. Yet many athletes that have graced the cover in years past haven't always lived up to the hype. In fact, due to the number of players that have missed the mark within the Madden NFL franchise, many fans of the series believe that being on the cover is actually a curse. They believe that the cover athlete is destined to produce a vastly inferior season to the year prior, or struggle with the injury bug for most of the season, all because their likeness is featured on the latest game's box art. But how true is this for the NHL series? Is being featured on the cover of an NHL game a blessing or a curse? Well, in this 3-part miniseries, we're going to attempt to try and find out. So in today's video, join me as we try to answer the question: is the NHL cover athlete curse real? Now I know what you're thinking, folks. How on earth are we going to do this, Odd Man Rush? Well, I have compiled a list of all 30 NHL games that have been released by EA Sports since 1991, made a note of the cover athlete or athletes on every game's box art, and researched each player's performance both in the year before and the season during their appearance on the cover. That way, we can determine whether each cover athlete's season was cursed, improved, or showed little difference compared to the year prior, which earned them the honour in the first place. I want to make it clear though that I'm solely focusing on each cover athlete's individual numbers, as well as the accolades they received during the 2 seasons in question. I'm not comparing how their teams performed during the regular season, or whether they made it to the playoffs. Obviously, if their team won a Stanley Cup championship that year, then you can't really consider that a cursed season, but I'm not taking post-season numbers, or lack thereof, into account. After all, a cover athlete could have dominated the league and won a bunch of awards that year, but the rest of their roster might not have pulled their weight or played well enough in the long run, so they didn't get the chance to suit up in the playoffs. In order to keep things as fair and consistent as possible, I don't think overall team success should be applied when judging if a cover athlete's season was cursed or not. But hey, maybe we can delve deeper into whether a cover athlete's team is more likely to make or miss the playoffs in another miniseries later down the road. Just spitballing here, you know. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the first 10 games of the NHL series. In part 2, we'll look at the middle 10, and in part 3, we'll look at the most recent 10, before bringing all the data together and coming to our conclusion. Sounds simple enough, right? Oh, and one last thing before we start, I'm not including players who are only on the cover for certain regions or markets. I mean, some of these titles have as many as 5 different cover athletes for one game alone, so I'm just going to look at the players who were on the official worldwide release. That said, if the series does well enough and you guys want me to look at the regional cover athletes as well, then I'm sure we can do that at some point in the future also. But anyway, let's begin with part 1, the early years. We'll start at the very beginning, as it's a very good place to start, and kick off with Nhl Hockey, also known as Nhl Hockey 92. This is the first of EA Sports' hockey games, which was released back in 1991, and the cover admittedly contains one of the most confusing choices for the cover athlete in the entire series. Nhl Hockey's box art features several players from the LA Kings and the New Jersey Devils, who are seemingly anonymous as you cannot see their nameplates or their jersey numbers. That said, the only player to be officially credited as being on the cover is Los Angeles Kings netminder Glen Healy. So technically, Healy is the first ever cover athlete for an NHL video game. However, the reason this is a confusing choice for the cover athlete is because the game was released in 1991, when Glen Healy was playing for the New York Islanders. In fact, Healy hadn't played for the Los Angeles Kings since the 88-89 NHL season, a whole 2 years prior. I guess the development team were big fans of Healy's stint in California, but still guys, at least feature a player with the team they were actually playing for at the time. It's really not that difficult, folks. But anyway, let's take a look at Healy's numbers and see whether he fell victim of a cover athlete curse. During the season before the game was released in 89-90, Glen Healy debuted with the New York Islanders and posted a 12-19-6 record, a 3.49 goals against average, and a .894 save percentage in 39 games. So Healy became the cover athlete of the first ever NHL game off the back of an under 500 record, a goals against average of almost 3.5, and a save percentage of under 900. The 90s were a crazy time, man. So how did he do once he was on the cover? Well, during the following 1991 season, Glen Healy would suit up in his sophomore season with the Islanders and put up an 18-24-9 record, a 3.32 goals against average, and a .893 save percentage in 53 games. So the year that Healy was on the cover, he played 14 more games, posted a 6-5-3 record in those extra games played, and posted a better goals against average to go with it, but his save percentage was ever so slightly worse. While he certainly wasn't a frontrunner for the Vezina that year, I don't think you can make the argument that Healy was a victim of the cover athlete curse in 1991. In fact, his cover year was almost identical to his prior season in the kind of individual numbers he produced, so I would say that Healy was neither helped nor hindered by being the cover athlete of Nhl Hockey 92. Oh, but don't you worry folks, this is only just the beginning. Next up on our journey through hockey game history, we have Nhl Pa Hockey 93. This title features the most credited NHL players to ever feature on a single game's cover at one time, as it stars Philadelphia Flyers forward Rod Brindamal, New York Rangers netminder Mike Richter, and defenseman Randy Moller. Since there's so many athletes on this cover compared to many of the later games, let's quickly go through each player and see how well they did. Firstly, let's look at Rod Brindamal. During the prior 91-92 NHL season, Brindamal scored 33 goals and 77 points in 80 regular season games, and earned himself a place at the 1992 NHL All-Star Game for his efforts. When he was on the cover during the 92-93 season, Brindamal would see a noticeable improvement in his numbers by potting 37 goals and 86 points in 82 games. However, his increased production wasn't enough to return to the All-Star Game or earn any other individual awards. Despite going without any accolades that year, I think it's obvious that Brindamal's game improved while he was on the cover, as he scored at over a point per game pace compared to the under point per game pace he scored at the year prior. And besides, All-Star games only take half the season into account, so I don't see it as too much of a negative compared to his improved production here. Next, let's take a look at Rangers goaltender Mike Richter. During the prior 91-92 season, Richter posted a 23-12-2 record, a 3.11 goals against average, and a .901 save percentage in 41 games, and was also named to the 1992 All-Star Game to play alongside Brindamal. However, Richter is officially the first NHL cover athlete to be hit with some kind of curse, as during the following 92-93 NHL season, he would take a huge step back by posting a 13-19-3 record, a 3.82 goals against average, and a .886 save percentage in 38 games. So he produced a worse record, posted far worse individual numbers, and didn't get another invite to the All-Star Game. Sounds like a cursed season to me, folks. And lastly for the sophomore cover, we have defensive defenseman Randy Moller. Now Moller is another interesting choice for the cover, as similarly to Glen Healy, he wasn't with the team he was pictured with on the cover by the time the game actually came out. During the 91-92 NHL season, Moller spent the first 43 games of the year with the Rangers, before a mid-season trade to the Buffalo Sabres, where he finished the season having scored 3 goals and 12 points in 56 games. The year he was on the cover in 92-93, Moller was still playing for the Buffalo Sabres and scored 2 goals and 9 points in just 35 games. So he may have scored 3 less points that year, but he played almost half the games than the year prior, so I'm going to say there wasn't too much of a difference between these 2 years of his career. That means that the cover of Nhl Pa Hockey 93 had one player that played better than the year before, one that played far worse, and one that played pretty much the same. Hey, at least we're getting some variety here. Moving swiftly on to the third game in the series, which is of course Nhl 94. This legendary game in the series features a pair of athletes on the cover, a trend that would continue for the next 3 titles, as it stars LA Kings forward Thomas Sandstrom and Boston Bruins netminder Andy Moog. During the 92-93 NHL season, Thomas Sandstrom had quite the year for himself, as he potted 25 goals and 52 points in just 39 games with the Kings, putting him on pace to post a 50-goal, 100-point year had he been healthy the entire season. However, during the following 93-94 season, the Finnish forward would continue to score at a similar pace to the year prior, but he played in almost double the amount of regular season games, as he finished the year with 23 goals and 58 points in 79 games, split between the Kings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So although he played close to a full season of hockey while he was on the cover, and still produced respectable stats, it was a clear step back from his over point per game effort the season prior, so Sandstrom becomes player number 2 to be hit with the cover athlete curse. And what about Andy Moog? Well, Moog became the 3rd straight player to be featured on the cover, who was no longer playing for the team he was pictured with when the title finally came out. By the conclusion of the 92-93 season, Andy Moog had posted a 37, 14 and 3 record, a 3.16 goals against average, and a .876 save percentage in 55 games. So he produced a strong team record, but his individual stats left a fair bit to be desired, especially for the mid-90s. However, when he was on the cover during the 93-94 NHL season, Moog had joined the newly relocated Dallas Stars, having been traded by Boston in June of 1993. During his debut year in Texas, Moog produced an interesting set of statistics, as he posted a 24, 20 and 7 record, a 3.27 goals against average, and a .894 save percentage in 55 games. So he played exactly the same number of games as the year before, but he won 13 less games and posted a worse goals against average. However, his save percentage was noticeably better, to the point where he was almost rocking a number in the 900s. That said, 2 out of the 3 of his individual stats had taken a sizable hit, so I think it's fair to say that Andy Moog suffered from the curse too. This means that NHL 94 is the first title in the series where multiple athletes on the cover suffered from the curse, as both Sandstrom and Moog produced significantly down seasons compared to the year prior. So the most beloved game in the series, and the godfather of NHL gaming, is also the title that gave legitimacy to the cover athlete curse. Ah, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Next up, we have NHL 95. This was the first EA Sports hockey title to be released on handheld devices alongside the usual PC and console releases, and it featured New York Rangers forward Alexei Kovalev and Vancouver Canucks netminder Kirk Mcclain on the cover. This duo was likely selected due to the Rangers and the Canucks being the 2 teams who battled it out for the 1994 Stanley Cup. Of course, it was New York who took the Game 7 victory to clinch their latest championship in franchise history, while the Canucks missed out on their organisation's first ever cup and subsequently destroyed their own city by rioting. Such is the Vancouver way. But enough of that, let's start with Alexei Kovalev. In the prior 93-94 season, Kovalev scored 23 goals and 56 points in 76 regular season games, and helped the Rangers get their hands on the aforementioned Stanley Cup, thanks to potting an impressive 21 points in 23 playoff games. Now, it's important to mention that the following 94-95 NHL season was limited to just 48 games due to a lockout that lasted through the first few months of the year. This meant that Kovalev played in just 40 games that season and scored 13 goals and 28 points for his efforts. This put him on pace to approximately score 26 goals and 56 points over a full NHL season, which would have been almost identical to his numbers the year prior. This means that the only major difference between the 2 years was that the Rangers didn't repeat their Stanley Cup success during the following 94-95 season, but you can't exactly blame Kovalev solely for that, so I think we'll say that he saw no real difference when he was on the cover. So how did Kirk Mcclain fare in comparison? Well, during the 93-94 season, Mcclain posted a 23, 26 and 3 record, a 2.99 goals against average, and a .891 save percentage in 52 games. A guy who went under 500 for the regular season and posted a sub-900 save percentage managed to take his team all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Talk about stepping up your game in the playoffs, eh, folks? Now, during the lockout-shortened 94-95 season, McClain would find a way to continue his performance from the prior postseason, as he posted an 18, 12 and 10 record, a 2.75 goals against average, and a .904 save percentage in 40 games. So in 12 less games played, McClain cut his number of losses in half and posted noticeably improved individual numbers too. That doesn't sound like much of a curse to me, folks. Welcome to the improved list, McClain. We're getting a fair way through the early years now, as next we have NHL 96. This is the last title in the series to feature more than one athlete on the cover, as it stars New Jersey Devils defenseman Scott Stevens and Detroit Red Wings forward Steve Eiserman. During the lockout-shortened 94-95 season, Scott Stevens potted 2 goals and 22 points in 48 games, while also racking up 56 penalty minutes in the process. Yet this was his lowest amount of time spent in the box by a noticeable margin since he first entered the league in 1982. When he was on the cover though for the 95-96 season, Stevens found all sorts of success, as he notched 5 goals and 28 points in 82 games, racked up 100 penalty minutes, and earned his 7th trip to the NHL All-Star Game. So although he only scored 6 more points in almost double the amount of games played, Stevens' game was less about scoring and more about hard-nosed shutdown play, so it's a little unfair on him to rate his season based solely on his overall point totals. I mean, the dude was named an All-Star and continued to put the fear of God into his opponents. That's an improved year if you ask me, folks. But what about Steve Eiserman? Well, during the lockout-shortened 94-95 season, Eiserman scored 12 goals and 38 points in 47 games. Not bad, but nothing to write home about, is it? However, during the following 95-96 season, the captain produced his best season in 3 years by potting 36 goals and 95 points in 80 games. Yeah, I think that's an improved season too, don't you? We're halfway through the early years now, as next on our list is NHL 97. This title started the now 25-year-old tradition of having a singular athlete on the title, and it of course features Florida Panthers netminder John Vanbiesbrouck, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Interestingly though, this game would be the only one in the series to feature just a goalie on the cover until 2014, a whole 17 years after. Why is it that goalies never get any love? But I digress. During the prior 95-96 season, Vanbiesbrouck posted a 26, 20 and 7 record, a 2.68 goals against average, and a .904 save percentage in 57 games, which was good enough to earn him a place at the 1996 NHL All-Star Game. When he was on the cover for the 96-97 season, Vanbiesbrouck played the same number of games as the year prior, but produced noticeably better numbers thanks to posting a 27, 19 and 10 record, a 2.29 goals against average, and a .919 save percentage, earning his 2nd straight appearance at the All-Star Game too. So he was given the same number of games between the pipes, received the same accolade in both years, and managed to play even better than the year before, both in his overall record and his individual stats. Hard to argue that he didn't have a better season while he was on the cover, and it's one of the better performances we've seen from a netminder so far, so on the improved list you go, Vanbiesbrouck. Next up on our journey, we have NHL 98. This is just the 2nd title in the series to feature a European-born player on the cover, and this is when EA Sports really started to get into the rhythm of picking the right athlete for the job, as it stars Colorado Avalanche forward Peter Forsberg. During the 96-97 NHL season, Forsberg scored an impressive 28 goals and 86 points, and earned himself a place at the 1997 All-Star Game, despite being out of the lineup for a dozen or so games due to suffering a bruised thigh. If that wasn't impressive enough though, the year he was on the cover in 97-98, Forsberg potted 25 goals and 91 points in just 72 regular season games, made another appearance at the All-Star Game, and finished the season on the first-team All-Star list as the best centre in the entire league. What's that? Forsberg is the 5th straight player who produced improved numbers while he was on the cover? If there is a cover athlete curse, Scoresberg sure as hell hasn't seen it. Just a few more titles to look at in part 1, as next we have NHL 99. This was the only title in the series that was released on the Nintendo 64 and featured one of the most hyped prospects of his generation in Philadelphia Flyers forward Eric Lindros. During the 97-98 NHL season, Lindros had a pretty good year for himself by notching 30 goals and 71 points in just 63 games, and received an invitation to join Forsberg at the 1998 All-Star Game. However, during the following 98-99 NHL season, Lindros suited up in over 70 regular season games for just the second time in his 7-year career up until that point, and produced 40 goals and 93 points in just 71 games, which unsurprisingly earned him another All-Star nod. So when he was on the cover, Eric Lindros scored 22 more points in just 8 more games than he played the year prior. Chalk him up as another player who improved while he was the cover athlete, folks. Oh, and bonus points to EA Sports for getting Lindros during one of the healthiest seasons of his entire career. That wasn't an easy thing to figure out back in the day. Penultimately, in part 1 of our investigation, we have NHL 2000. This title features St. Louis Blues defenseman Chris Pronger on the cover, and is the first game in the series to feature a blue liner all alone on the box art. In fact, it would become the only title in the series to do so for almost a decade after its release. Well, at least they picked a good one to put on there, folks. During the prior 98-99 NHL season, Pronger scored 13 goals and 46 points in 67 games, and was named to the 1999 All-Star Game, making him the 4th player in a row to be named an All-Star the year before they were on the cover. When the following 99-2000 season rolled around though, Pronger would produce one of, if not the best season of his entire NHL career, as he potted 14 goals and 62 points in 79 games, was named to the All-Star Game once again, earned a spot on the league's first All-Star team, was awarded the Norris Trophy as the league's best defenseman, and was even given the Hart Memorial Trophy given to the league's MVP. So not only had he vastly improved his scoring numbers and been recognised as the best player at his position that year, he also became the first defenseman to be crowned the league MVP since Bobby Orr back in 1972. If breaking your position's 28-year Hart Trophy drought doesn't get you on the improved list, I don't know what does. Put him on there, folks. And finally, the 10th game in the NHL series and the final title of Part 1, NHL 01. This title was the first to be available on the newly released PlayStation 2 and featured British-born forward Owen Nolan, who was playing for the San Jose Sharks at the time. During the prior 99-2000 NHL season, Nolan produced his best year in California thanks to notching 44 goals and 84 points in 78 regular season games, while also adding his name to the list of players who made an appearance at the All-Star Game the year before they were on the cover. However, Part 1 ends on a pretty sour note, as the following 2001 season saw Nolan take a huge step back in practically every statistical category, since he scored 24 goals and 49 points in just 57 games, while also breaking a 4-year streak of players who were invited to the All-Star Game the year they were on the cover. So not only did he produce almost half the totals that he had during the year prior, he had also spent much of the year out of the lineup, having struggled with the injury bug. Considering these two factors are what the cover athlete curse is built on, Nolan adds his name to that unfortunate list. Given that we are a decade into the NHL video game franchise now, has there been a cover athlete curse so far? Well, of the 15 players to feature on the cover of the series' first 10 titles, only 4 different athletes, those being Mike Richter, Thomas Sandstrom, Andy Moog and Owen Nolan, seem to have been hit by the cover athlete curse, as they all performed noticeably worse compared to the year prior. However, 3 cover athletes, those being Glen Healy, Randy Moller and Alexei Kovalev, saw little to no difference either way in their game when they were featured, while 8 different cover athletes all produced a much improved season compared to the year prior. This means that during the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, an NHL player was twice as likely to produce a greater season than be hit by a curse when they were on the cover. It's also worth pointing out that since EA Sports began using the lone cover athlete from NHL 97 onwards, 4 of the first 5 solo players went on to have vastly improved seasons. So either EA Sports had a pretty good track record of picking players on the rise who could live up to their new lofty pedestal, or being on the cover was more often than not a good luck charm. But will this streak continue for the rest of the titles in the series? Will future cover athletes continue to thrive under the spotlight, or will it become more of a curse as time goes on? I guess we'll have to keep digging in part 2 and find out, folks. And on that note, I'm going to end part 1 of our investigation into the NHL cover athlete curse. What do you guys think about the results so far? Are you surprised with how well a lot of these players performed while they were on the cover, or do you think it was mostly beginner's luck? Also, are you interested in watching part 2 of this miniseries? I'm planning on dedicating my next few weekend uploads to parts 2 and 3, so if you enjoyed this video, please do let me know, as I'll continue making it if it gets a good response. If you didn't enjoy it though and you'd prefer to see something else, also do let me know, as if the majority of you didn't like it or would prefer something else, I won't waste my time making the rest. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Carl Fairbank, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, Drew Fawcett, Jordan Whitehead, Martin Tolness, Paul Mallia, Roman from London, Tom from Finland, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.